I'm Cora. I've decided to restart my art journey, and everything I learned I note down in Google Sites. Diving into anatomy is something I've been wanting to do for a while, but I've never brought myself to actually do it. For my beginner artists watching this video, most people would recommend that you learn basic figure drawing first, and I would as well. Picard made a video on how to progress on anatomy. I will try to break down everything, so you're welcome to stay. I've been kinda planning out on how to study basic anatomy. I don't know if this was the best way to approach bone and muscle anatomy, but this is how I did it. My mindset was basically Lego or IKEA. I was thinking what piece was that piece connected to. I searched for a free 3D model of the human body to study and reference from. Some people recommend just finding a free model in Blender. I was just too lazy to download Blender and learn how it works, so instead I decided to scavenge for websites instead. I don't exactly know what you can do with a model in Blender, but I imagine that you can do a lot. An advantage for using websites is that you can easily access them on your phone or tablet. It's also nice for those who doesn't have a PC available to them at all times. These are the two websites that I settle with. Website number 1, this is psychotbody.com. It's a male and female model, and you can go from skin, muscle, organs, skeleton, blood vessels, and nerves. If you think that the organs and nerves are distracting, there's a second option that allows you to hide specific groups. You can also pin certain muscles and see their name, then hide the rest of the unpinned stuff. For the second one, this is an anatomy reference made by Mark Brunette. I decided to use this along with the Zygote body since this model is more muscular and it's also more detailed than the Zygote. I'm sorry, I just love skeleton memes. There's so many little things that I won't get into. I'm just here to draw, not to get a degree in biology. Let's start with the spine. The spine can be divided into 5 parts, and it has 4 major curves. There's the cervical curve, thoracic curve, lumbar curve, and the sacral curve, and each part will curve away from each other. The first 7 pieces of the spine is the neck, the cervical vertebrae. They call the 7 first pieces C1 to C7. The next 12 pieces is the thoracic vertebrae, T1 to T12. This is where your 12 rows of ribs are attached to. And the last 5 pieces is the lumbar vertebrae, L1 to L5. It connects the upper body and the lower body. Then we have the sacral curve, which is made up by the sacrum and the coccyx. And these are also a part of your pelvis. And there you have the spine. Next up is the rib cage. It's kinda shaped like an egg, and it's attached to the thoracic part. In the middle it has an opening, and you can kinda feel this rib opening. There's also the sternum at the middle of the ribs. The rib cage actually goes down a bit, all the way down to L2. Further up we have the collarbone and the shoulder blade. The collarbone is attached to the sternum and the shoulder blades are attached by a bunch of muscles. These are what is responsible for keeping your arms together. Quick tip, when you draw poses, these bones can move independently. Further down we have the pelvis, which is responsible for keeping your lower body attached. For female skeletons, their pelvis will be wider. These are the part of the skeleton that I'll be covering for this video. Now, how do we draw them? The reason why I recommend to learn how to draw the skeleton is to understand where the muscles are attached to, and also because some of the skeleton is visible from the outside. Let's start with the ribcage. For a realistic human, the ribcage should be able to fit around 2 skulls. From the side, it's about the size of 3/4 of the front. As for the opening part, it starts around the middle. To draw and simplify it, we can kinda draw an egg form. We can then find the middle and then draw the opening if necessary. It depends on how skinny they are. The spine can be simplified into a line that represents each curve that I mentioned earlier. This is a very simplified guide for the pelvis. ProGroup has a full 9-minute guide on it. If we tilt the pelvis, we can kinda split it into 2 areas, the top area and the bottom area. We can start off by simplifying it into a cylinder, and you can kind of see that it also moves inwards, sort of like a stretched out bucket. The sacrum starts behind here a bit above the middle. It's shaped like a triangle and it will curve towards the middle. The top part here is attached to the sacrum. It has a little curve here from behind. From the side it's about 3/5 of the overall shape, and then it starts going downwards roughly to the middle. For the bottom part, we can start off by connecting it here at the front. We can also connect it to the bottom. From the side, we can split it into 5 parts again. The bottom part makes roughly about 3 out of 5 parts. Up here at the second lowest quarter of the pelvis height, about half of the bottom or 1/4 of the overall shape. This is where the leg bones will be connected. There's a triangular hole and 2 holes on each side. A lot of muscles will be attached to this part. If we turn the pelvis and ribcage into simple shapes and rotate them, the pelvis bucket thing is about half the height of the ribcage. But usually the bucket is actually tilted, which makes it appear that it's about 2/3 the size of the ribs. The collar is connected to the sternum, and the shoulder blades in a neutral position should stop somewhere here before the head. It could be a tiny bit more or a tiny bit less, and the height of it is about 2/5 or 2/6 of the ribcage. For the overall height, without including the neck, the ribcage should make about half of the torso. There is different ways to draw the torso, maybe by using the bean method, maybe by using the robot bean method, where there's a box attached to it, or maybe use a box for each part. You can also draw a very simplified version of the skeleton. There's a lot of ways. For the parts that's actually visible through the skin, there's the pelvis at the front on each side, the collarbone, the shoulder blades, and a bit of the sternum, and also the ribcage. All of this can depend on how skinny they are. Okay, that was a lot, but it wasn't that bad. We still got the muscles though. There's a bunch of muscles, a lot of them. There's also muscles hidden beneath other muscles, and for the sake of simplicity, I will only cover the muscles that are actually visible. You really don't need to know about the internal intercostal muscles or the psoas minor if you want to draw a person. I mean, unless you want to, I'm not gonna stop you. Let's start with the front. At the front we have the external obliques. They're attached to the pelvis and some of the ligaments. These ligaments are what makes it appear sort of V-shaped. They go pretty far up and are attached to the ribcage. For the obliques, we can just kinda connect them from the ribs down to the pelvis and the ligaments. Here's the rectus abdominis, also known as abs. I love abs. They actually start pretty high up. For the abs, we can find the middle between the top of the ribcage and where they're attached to at the pelvis. We can also see that it goes a bit along the rib opening, and then they converge a bit further down. For the 2 top rows of abs, the pecs will cover a bit of the top abs, and they will appear a bit smaller than the ones below them. The 3rd row of abs is about 1/3 the size of the bottom area. The obliques can be split up to multiple parts. The first part of the obliques can be connected to the top row of the abs, and the second and third part of the obliques can be connected to the second row of the abs, and the 4th row of the obliques can be attached to the 3rd row of the abs. The rest of the obliques can bulge out a bit if you're pretty muscular. There's also the serratus anterior. They're a bit hidden though by other muscles. They sort of sit directly on the ribs and start up here from behind. The serratus anterior, the little guy, sits sort of between the obliques. This creates sort of a zigzag pattern. They aren't very visible though. They're covered by a back muscle and also the pecs. At most you'll be able to see like 5 or 4 of them. Next up we have the pectoralis major, 2 of them. They are connected to the sternum and the collar, and they are connected to the humerus, the big arm bone. They cover about half the ribcage. Then the deltoids, your shoulders. They start up here at the end of the collarbone and the shoulder blades, and then they connect down to the arm. Keep in mind that everything is 3-dimensional and has a bit of thickness to it. Of course, this can depend on how muscular whoever you're drawing is. Not everyone has visible abs. Now for the neck and back muscles. There's a bunch of muscles that connects to the head, but the majority will be covered by 3 muscles. The 2 sternocleidomastoids at the front, and the trapezius from behind. The sternocleidomastoid connects a bit from the back, and you can see them from there. They are the ones that sort of create this V shape on the neck, and they attach to the middle of the sternum. There's another muscle on top of it called the platysma, but due to how thin the platysma is, it's not very visible. Now it's time for back muscles. Let's start with the trapezius. It's attached to the back of the head, and also on top and a bit below the shoulder blades. Further down, it attaches to T12, or about the middle between the top of the ribs to the very bottom of the pelvis. The white part is the tendon, which is why it kinda bends inwards a bit, and there's also the tendon up here, which is why it sometimes makes this diamond shape. It's basically sort of a star shape, but keep in mind where the trapezius is attached to. The trapezius will also be visible from the front. Next up, partially covered by the trapezius, we have two muscles, the infraspinatus and the teres major. I personally just call them the demon eyes cause I watch Bucky. They attach themselves to the end of the shoulder blades here. The infraspinatus, the top one, goes up to the shoulder here, while the teres major on the other hand will wrap around the humerus. Keep the teres major in mind, it'll become important later on. Around the demon eyes, we got a big one, the latissimus dorsi. From the side, they are the ones that covers the serratus anterior, and like the teres major, they also attach to the humerus, and they will converge down and attach to the pelvis. And because they converge, some of the obliques will be visible from behind. The tendon also goes along the spine, and because it's connected to the pelvis, the tendon looks like a star or diamond shape at the bottom. It's very visible on bodybuilders. And there you go, all the visible muscles on the torso. Or is it? When we raise our arms, of course the triceps and biceps will be visible. But remember the pecs, teres and latissimus dorsi? The ones that attach from the rib cage to the arm. And when the arm is raised, they will be a stretch along with it. Wait a minute, is that another visible muscle? The coracobrachialis. It attaches from the shoulder to the humerus. And we're still not done yet. Let's learn how to draw water balloons. They originate here halfway down the pectorals, and they also go a bit along with the pectorals towards the arm, which is why when the arm is raised, the chest will be raised a bit as well. Since the pectorals are broken up here by the sternum, they will have a visible gap as well. Both of them will go in their own direction, about 45-degree angle. On the side, it looks like there's two bumps. That's because one of the bumps is the pectorals, while the other one is the boba. Also keep in mind that they are affected by gravity, by the way. Okay, we're done. This was not as bad as I thought. Like, when you get going and you get into a flow, it's not that bad. For my next two parts, I'm not really scared about the hand episode since I've already drawn hands a lot of times before. I'm more scared about the feet episode since I don't have a lot of feet knowledge compared to hands. Alright, bye.